You may have just sold your business and be excited about it. But here's a question you should be thinking about. How much of the company's risk did you actually sell, and how much did you actually keep? Stay tuned to today's podcast as we discuss the risks after a business sale. You are not going to want to miss this.
Thanks for joining us on Legacy Beyond Wealth. I'm Ben George with Rob Shelton, founder of Axio Wealth Management. And we're kind of having a few conversations here on this show about business owners and exiting and some things to be thinking about, some intentional planning that needs to be done and why you need to start that before the sale happens. And really after the sale, what should you be thinking about too? So subscribe to the channel, to the show. If you haven't done already, we're having some more conversations around this, and check out some past videos to kind of really dig in if you are a business owner. But today we are talking about the deal is closed. Why isn't all your money safe yet, Rob? So I know this is a pretty good question that you probably get. When you hear I sold my business, people just assume the owner walked away. They're doing great. They got the cash. The story is over. They're walking away into the sunset, right? But that's not always how the deal works. It's not ever that smooth, is it?
It isn't. And some deals are simple, but many are layered. And you might have cash at close, or an escrow holdback, or an earnout tied to future performance, or a seller note paid over time, or even a rollover of equity into an acquiring company. So the headline number can be very different from the risk-adjusted reality. An owner might say, hey, I sold for 30 million, but maybe 18 million came out at closing, and only 3 million is left in escrow, 4 million depending upon hitting future targets that were set in the documents with the buyer, and 5 million is rolled into the buyer's platform. And so that's not always the same 30 million that's just sitting inside of a bank somewhere.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. There's a lot of reason to celebrate, right? It's not about kind of throwing up warning flags and making you be worried about this process, but this episode really wants to just dive into that fine print after the celebration, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to sound that to be too negative. I mean, deal structure can be very useful. It can help bridge valuation gaps. It can keep the seller aligned with the buyer. It can create, a second opportunity if the rollover equity performs really well. But the owners need to understand what they still own and what they can be exposed to and what could go wrong. Thinking of a deal that was done with a client of ours, in another state, and they had sold half of their practice, and the other half they rolled over into new equity into this private equity firm, and the contract was there. And as we got looking at it and reviewing the contract, we asked, did the attorney and the tax professional talk with each other? And it was pretty clear that they didn't, because the payroll was being handled the wrong way and everything of that nature. We're grateful we came in 3 months after the exit so we could be able to get things straightened out before the next tax filing took place. But that could have been quite the mess by not making sure, understanding all the exposures and how things are supposed to work post-closing.
Yeah, it's a good example, good story to share to kind of kick this off. So let's take this, kind of one at a time in each of these areas. I want to start with the earnout. Rob, what is this and why does the earnout matter?
Yeah, an earnout is when part of the purchase price is paid later if the business meets certain targets. And those targets might be based on revenue or EBITDA or client retention or some other metric that's out there. The opportunity is obvious. If the company performs well, the seller may receive additional money. The risk is that the seller no longer fully controls the business. So the buyer may, change strategy, staffing, pricing, accounting methods, or other investment priorities. Those changes can drastically affect whether the earnout is achieved or not.
Yeah, so the seller might be, depending on a performance-based, payout or earnout, but it might be out of their control, right?
Yeah, and that's the key point. And emotionally, that can be very frustrating. And business owners are used to having and being in control. And after the sale, they may still deeply care, but they may not have the final say. And that's why the wealth plan should not treat the earnout as a guarantee. It can be modeled as an upside, but the family's essential lifestyle and long-term security should not depend entirely on money that may or may not arrive.
Okay, so that's the earnout. Good starting point. What about the escrow holdback? So this sounds a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah, these usually are more straightforward, but they still matter. An escrow is money that's held back for a period of time to cover potential claims. Maybe they're working on capital adjustments or representations and warranties and customer issues, tax matters, or other obligations. And the seller may eventually receive that money, but it's not fully available yet. So again, don't spend it mentally before it's been released. And as I'm thinking about this, Ben, there was one entrepreneur that called me, never became a client, but wanted to take advice from us because they'd sold the business. It was in escrow. The buyer had control of all of the company accounts, all of the bank accounts, but he was not getting his escrow payouts per the contract. It was very, very frustrating for him that it seemed like he lost all control, but yet didn't get fully compensated. And that one, unfortunately, had to involve a lot of post-closing attorneys and fees to be able to resolve that issue.
Gotcha. What about seller notes? I know this is another kind of common piece. How should a business owner be thinking about these?
Yeah, so a seller note means the buyer owns the seller money over time. In effect, the seller has become the lender, and that introduces some credit risk. Will the buyer be able to pay, and what are the terms? Is the note secured? What happens if the business struggles, and where do the sellers sit compared to other lenders? And a seller note might be perfectly reasonable, but it should be evaluated like any other investment. It's just not money that's going to be coming in later. It's a financial asset with risk. And to share another story there, Ben, we had a client that did one of these on a piece of property that they had sold. It was actually a gas station that they owned and they had sold. And the new owner came in and totally ran that business into the ground to the point that they ended up going bankrupt. And the owner had to go back and foreclose, or the seller had to go back and foreclose to get the property back. But now what do they do with an asset that has been run into the ground, that has lost customers and loyalty and brand recognition? And so those are things that definitely need to be evaluated as part of the deal.
Yeah, there's a lot to evaluate in this process, which is what we're talking about, but also why you should reach out to a financial advisor or somebody that can help you manage that wealth and manage, your life and make sure everything lines up as well, which is what Axio Wealth Management does. I know with private equity, there's more and more of these private equity deals. I think that term rollover equity is much more common. I think more and more owners are hearing about that, Rob. What do you need to understand about that?
Yeah, so rollover equity means the seller takes a part of their proceeds and reinvests it into the acquiring company. And the pitch is often called the second bite of the apple. If the buyer grows the company and sells later at a higher valuation, the seller may participate in that upside. And that can be very attractive, but it also is very illiquid and it's very concentrated, and it may be tied to leverage and controlled by somebody else, and the timeline may be uncertain. So the question is not, is rollover equity good or bad? The question is, how much of my family's future am I comfortable with tying up to this next chapter that has this possibility?
Yeah, I like kind of reframing that. I think that's, the case with a lot of things you probably talk about with your clients, Rob. There's not, any one thing is not necessarily good or bad. It's really, how does this align with what I need, with my family's future? It's a better way to look at it, right?
You have to. And, so often we get caught up in that valuation or what the possibilities may be with the money. But we have to remember that a founder may believe strongly in the business, the industry, and the buyer strategy, but that conviction has to be able to make sure that it's not overwhelming the need to evaluate concentration risk, and making sure that we're not overextending too much into any one basket, or all our eggs sitting in one basket, if you will. So before the sale, maybe 80 or 90% of the owner's net worth was tied up in the company. Then after the sale, we usually want to reduce that concentration to making sure that we don't have, again, most of those eggs sitting in one single basket.
Are you ready to unlock the freedom to live your best life? Schedule your no-cost 60-minute discovery meeting with our team today. During this session, we'll take the time to understand your family's story and financial dreams. Together, we'll craft a personalized roadmap designed to help you achieve your goals. Let's explore how we can unlock the freedom for you and your family to thrive. Just click the link in the description of today's show to get started.
So for anyone that's maybe, kind of getting in this position or getting close to it, what would you suggest that owner do before, agreeing to any of these terms?
Yeah, I see. Definitely sit down and gain some clarity on what your best life looks like. And that's usually done with sitting down with a trained personal financial planning team. The deal attorney is focused on protecting the seller and the transactional documents, and that's critical. But the wealth advisor and the tax professional try to help translate that into real personal financial terms for somebody. So, for example, if the earnout is 0, are we still okay? If the rollover equity is locked up for 7 years, does that create liquidity issues? If the seller note pays out over time, how does that affect taxes and cash flow? And if the escrow is delayed, does it matter? If the owner wants to give money to his children or to charity, which assets can be used? And so having someone to go through that has that experience to be able to ask those thought-provoking questions will help gain clarity for that seller to really understand what deal would be best for them.
Yeah, I know that you're working through a lot of those questions and answers, and I know the emotional side is always going to play into that as well, which is another part of this to be thinking about. And again, why you work with someone. What about some red flags, Rob? Are there any red flags you tell a business owner that's maybe watching this video or listening to the show on a podcast? Any red flags you maybe just say, hey, watch out for these?
Yeah, I would say, as I look at those red flags, building your lifestyle around contingent money, meaning that it's based on someone else's control. And while we can't control everything, we want to try to maintain as much control and liquidity as one possibly can. Another is accepting a deal structure you don't understand because the headline or price sounds impressive. Another one is assuming the buyer's incentives are identical to yours. They may overlap, but that's not always the same thing. And one more, failing to coordinate estate planning around illiquid interests. If the rollover equity becomes really valuable, that can create estate planning opportunities, but also complexity. So you want to make sure that the attorney, tax professional, and the advisor are all taking this into consideration because those values can change quite dramatically.
Yeah, we talk about having that team working together for you, which is what Axio Wealth does, is they put a team that works on your behalf to figure out the best path forward and answer a lot of these questions. And, kind of wrapping this up, Rob, you got to kind of keep in mind here that the headline price is not your plan, is it?
Yeah. And again, this podcast here isn't meant to create fear, but it's meant to create clarity. A well-structured deal is going to be a wonderful outcome. But after a business sells, the question isn't just how much did I sell for? It's what risks do I still carry? And does my personal plan account for them? And if you're evaluating an offer, reviewing deal terms, or already navigating those earnouts, it's a good time for us to have a discovery meeting and sit down and ask some of those thought-provoking questions to help you gain clarity on how this exit is going to help you and your family live your best life.
Yeah, well, the easiest way to get in touch, again, all this is in the show description, make it easy for you, but go to AxioWM.com. You'll be able to set up that discovery call, begin talking about some of this stuff. And again, if you are thinking about selling, right, now's a great time to be having that conversation. Start getting that plan in place for what you're going to do after the exit is so very important. And we're going to have some more of these conversations around business ownership and exiting your business and making sure that you're understanding the process and the plan and how Rob and his team helps a business owner make it through that. And really, you put in so much hard work, you want to get the most out of it for you and your family moving forward. So that's what our intention here is with those videos. So please subscribe. We appreciate your support there. And we appreciate you watching another episode of Legacy Beyond Wealth. Take care.
Thanks, Ben.